There we go, we're good.
Okay, we're live. Okay, good morning, everybody. Senate Transportation Committee, Tuesday morning. We're thinking about S48, and it was the catalytic converter bill that we voted out here, and it came back to us with some changes, and I don't know quite what are they. Is anybody here to explain? Are you here to explain it for us?
If you'd like me to.
Okay, sure.
Love to.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning.
Quite a while ago, I forgot some of the things that were.
Sure. David Hall, Legislative Council, S48, an act relating to the sale of catalytic converters. As you indicated, Mr. Chair, you all voted this bill out of your committee to enhance the sort of the limitations in section 1 there on the buying and selling of the number of converters, the transportation of converters, sort of clarified and augmented the documentation requirements there on page 2. The House did not change any of your work on those provisions concerning sale and transportation of catalytic converters. So that's all the same, and unless you have questions about that, the House pieces begin on page 4 with section 2.
I'll refer to this sheet,
Aha.
okay?
Come out one?
Yes.
Have to-
Yes,
Give it
I
for
think
this morning.
I have that.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So,
This is something you prepared.
yes. So on page 1 of that section by section document,
Okay.
you'll see section 2, the House added 24 VSA section 2242D. And this is in the part of the statutes in Title 24 where we regulate salvage yards. And remember that salvage yards are under the jurisdiction of the Agency of Natural Resources. They have to be approved by ANR, but also the siting and the location are also regulated by the municipalities. So in this case, what the House did was add D to require for ANR before they issue a certificate of registration to a salvage yard that they must obtain written acknowledgement that the applicant is aware of and will comply with the laws governing buying, selling, transporting, record keeping scrap metal. So not all scrap metal processors are salvage yards, but all salvage yards are scrap metal processors. Remember that the way it's defined in Title 9, it could be a person engaged in the business of buying and selling scrap metal that's not necessarily a salvage yard, but the overlap is strong. So there's about 10 or 11 salvage yards that are certified or registered in the state. And again, this would require that A&R obtain acknowledgement that they know the law concerning scrap metal.
I have a question. If they are already in operation, they already have a certificate of registration, I would assume.
They do, but they have to renew it.
And so this is on renewal?
I suppose it could say issuance or renewal. but-
I think you should. I mean, and salvage yards, right now, they don't have to have an acknowledgement that they comply with. I mean, in other words, this is much broader than catalytic converters. It's around buying, selling, transporting, and record keeping for scrap metal.
Right.
So this is something.
They're already subject to those laws, and I think really the whole purpose of all of the things that the House added was to try to raise public awareness among the regulated communities that they are in fact subject to these laws and that they should be compliant with.
So my question is that this is much broader than catalytic converters. What we're requiring ANR to do now is, and it gets us out of our realm of jurisdiction, is my point, in terms of what the law is doing. But I assume since this came out of House Commerce, that maybe this is something they wanted added, or I don't know, because this is certainly much broader than the catalytic converters in terms of, and I gather right now then there's not written acknowledgement, so we're asking that there be one. I'm just kind of questioning what we already have in place and what this does. Is it actually adding something new, or is it an expansion of something that's already in place? And maybe I
It's a
should,
new requirement for the written acknowledgement. I mean, so under Title IX, Chapter 82, a catalytic converter is a kind of scrap metal.
right,
And I don't know. With the acknowledgement is that for the salvage yards to be informed and aware.
Is it also, David, is it because they were trying to say that they weren't aware of what their responsibilities were? Is it something with that, or somebody implying that they weren't, I mean, it just seems like that the scrapyard should already know what their requirements are. And so I'm just kind of questioning along kind of where Senator Kitchell's going is, why do we need that in there if they're already doing that? If they're already doing that, why do we have to acknowledge in our bill that that's what has to be there if that's what they're already supposed to be doing?
But I
Was the
suspect-
House concerned about that they weren't aware of catalytic converters or any part of that, or before they took it? I don't know why this needs to be in there. I'm confused as well.
I'm interpreting this language as, could it simply be just another thing that they have to read on the certification form that is them acknowledging that they read these things? So it's nothing more than that. If anything, it's adding additional statement on the certification form.
see, my problem is we don't have any context of what this requirement is. And I'm not disputing that it might be a good idea. Obviously, they have compliance and their laws, and some of the stuff that are in these salvage yards are pretty toxic. It's just, it's hard to know what we have in place now and what this adds to, but maybe that's something that we need to. Do you know if this came out of Commerce?
Yes.
It did. Okay, well, we can probably just talk to Chair Marcotte.
Stopped in today, but bring them in.
Could be helpful.
Yeah, I just want to get it so we can get it.
Because obviously this is getting beyond transportation. This is Commerce and Economic Development who had the bill. And they're looking at it from a different perspective than obviously we did here.
Should they look at it? Should Senate Economic Development consider this?
I don't know.
Or just bring Chair Marcotte in and talk through it?
Yeah, we can keep it as simple as we can with the lessons involved this year.
I haven't heard any concerns about this language, so I don't have any myself, but you're right. We don't want to be overly prescriptive.
And I guess as a courtesy, we should at least let our Economic Development Committee know that amendments were being made.
So can I go back to that? Does this have to be in there? Just because it come over from the other side, does it have to be in there?
I remember some hallway conversations where they were interested in just raising awareness about catalytic converters. So as scrapyards are aware that there's new rules.
So what harm does this language do?
I think it just adds another layer of complexity about who we're bringing to this bill, for one. I mean,
What do you mean by another layer? Tell me.
now we're gonna probably have the Senate Economic Development look at it. And, I mean, if they're already aware that this is what they're supposed to do, why do we need to mention it? That's where I'm at. And maybe they're just not aware. Maybe they weren't aware that that's what they had to do. So I don't know that.
I think that Representative Marcotte can be helpful in giving us some context of why they did it. Because this is obviously getting into an area of statute that we don't deal with.
Are they still meeting in the morning?
Is there any way we can email him or? Get him maybe out there?
And I meant just for economic development, it's a courtesy to say this is something, I imagine with all they're doing.
Can we email him, hey?
Yeah.
Mike Marcotte?
Let's move on to that.
Yeah,
Let's move on to the next one.
could he come in? Maybe if he had a minute, he could
Well,
just come
these
in.
are all from House Commerce and Economic Development. You see, the bill, that's where the House assigned the bill, not transportation. So
I apologize, I would have, I talked to him this morning too, and I would have said, hey, you got a few minutes this morning, I didn't
Well,
see.
because it's broader than a normal transportation issue when you're talking about
Well,
scrap metal.
our choice, you send the whole thing to economic development. They don't want to do that. I don't know. I see
I don't
that.
think that's necessary.
No.
I think we just need to learn more about what's happening now, how this changes what's
Yeah.
happening now.
I
I'd
don't,
like to get this thing passed this year, if possible.
well, I think having Representative Marcotte come down and explain what they did, and then just as a courtesy, I think, we should say this is what we're gonna concur with, if that's in fact our decision.
Do you recall if the administration spoke against or raised any concerns on any of this?
So they had the NR come in and testify, and the public testimony was that salvage yards have among the lowest compliance rates with existing statute and process. And so again, it's part of increasing public awareness and compliance specific to the issue of, the applicable requirements in that VSA chapter 82.
So your bill morphed into something a little more expansive as it relates to the larger compliance issue then, which gets us into a different.
What is the objective of this bill, the way to raise awareness of this to?
Your bill was to try to deal with the theft of converters and shut down the market. But then when it got to the House Committee of Jurisdiction, they obviously saw what this was in that larger context.
Senator Pritchett.
On section 3, I have a question. A makes it look like they're inspecting all stations or all the salvage yards. The B makes it seem like it's just one. Or is that?
At least one.
At least one.
So they currently have an inspection program. There's one person who is responsible for all of the salvage yards throughout the state. So it's stretched pretty thin. Congress's interest here, originally, they actually proposed that it'd be a little bit more prescriptive about how they would conduct the inspection programs, but A&R basically proposed this language and said this is what we can manage, and they agreed to the component B, to specifically address the issues raised in VSA chapter 82. So in particular, the record keeping components
Is that what's?
of that chapter, where you're supposed to keep 5 years worth of records for the trip buying and selling of scrap metal. And so that specific piece on B is to go to the salvage yards at least at least one per year, and say, are you, keeping records consistent with requirements of Title IX?
I'm increasingly uncomfortable with this committee concurring or even making decisions. It seems like when I'm looking at the criminal justice and requiring the council around law enforcement materials and trainings, if we know that they're in the process of doing a 3-year replacement of their entire curriculum.
So when this went to the House, they decided to send it to Congress.
Yes.
It went to Congress here too. We had a recommitted transportation.
It started it.
Talk to Senator Clarkson about them taking this up.
So the House basically added sections 2, 3, 4.
But
They didn't make any changes in the first article, the original bill. So they just added all this other stuff.
yes,
So what they did was use this bill as the vehicle to get into broader array.
Got away from catalytic converters.
Well, built on it, I guess you would say. And so they've expanded what this is way beyond the jurisdiction of this committee.
Well, it's a decision to send it there, it's fine with me.
No, well, I think probably we should discuss
Right, like,
with committee chair or vice chair, how to deal with this proposed amendment.
would we want judiciary to look at section 5?
I'll ask Senator Sears.
What's a lot of action.
Well,
Yeah, for criminal justice.
I know.
well, what they've done here is really expand up this right up, compared to a much more narrow bill.
We'll probably put a 20-year sentence in here. We're
Is-
done.
It's Representative Marcotte not available then?
He's on the floor right now, but the committee assistant just texted him to see if he could come down.
And then we can have Senator Sears take a look at this point.
Should have stuck it in the appropriation bill, that's all. Everything else goes through AG.
Yeah.
And we can let,
Dispatch.
we can let economic development know that I don't think they're gonna care or want to take it up.
Seems like a kind of a simple thing they left here.
When you say we, you want me to send a note to Keisha and Allison right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever I say we and it spells work, it means you.
Are you the clerk?
No, he's the vice chair.
He just loves
You're
it.
vice chair.
He loves it. He loves his email. He just loves it.
Read the type.
Oh, yeah, he likes that.
He's on his way down.
Here's all cool.
Wow.
Here he is.
Oh, look at that. Good
Hey,
stuff.
there we go.
Actually.
Yeah.
Told them the police were looking for him this morning, but
Yeah. Well, they found you instead.
So that's
They'll be
48.
waiting on the way home.
We're talking S48, and I guess there's some questions. for that. So, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Glad to,
Last
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, ready?
Well, we're looking at it and what your amendment does gets us in a whole different area than transportation normally would deal with. Because it looks like you're concerned in using this as a vehicle to address issues that you've seen around salvage yards and how you would like to put addition requirements. So we're not sure we're the right committee to be looking at this amendment that you've added to the catalytic converters. And we don't have any context as to, what natural resources does or what you're adding for requirements here. So we're kind of struggling with what the amendment does and whether we should ask.
We love the idea of getting back at these criminal lawyers. How we do it.
But now, so that's why we wanted you to come down to help put what you did in context, and then we'll decide where it might go from here.
So we had put into statute years ago, not just catalytic converters, but, all metals. We were having issues with people starting to build homes, and at nighttime, people were coming, grabbing all the copper out of them, or retrofitting,
That's right.
all of that stuff.
Right, yeah.
So we put that into place. I think what we found was that I don't think the police understood what their role or what the law said, that they were able to go to the salvage yards, and some do, some don't, of getting these logs anytime they want. And and also the salvage yards where they, I don't know that they knew that they were required to keep these logs as well. And so this is what we put in play is to make sure that, number one, law enforcement knows. And I think we took testimony also from the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. When they're training, they are only letting, when they're training new trainees, they're only giving them kind of highlights of what we've done here. And they thought that they should really get back to letting everyone know, not just trainees, but all law enforcement know what the changes we make here every year. So that's one piece. The other piece is to make sure that that the salvage yards understand what their duty is under the law. And so number of years ago, we changed who regulates the salvage yards from transportation to A&R. And the testimony that we took, there's one person that does the whole state. There's about 60 salvage yards. So every year they go and inspect 20 of them. So what we're saying is, when you're doing those inspections, make sure that you take a look and make sure they're keeping their logs. Because I think that's helpful for law enforcement to understand, what things are going on. They can get those logs and take a look. So it's making sure everybody knows what the law is and make sure they know what their duty is under the law to make sure they're not breaking it.
So this language has been established, it's law already, and as I think Senator Chittenden touched upon it, you're just making people aware that this bill now, that this really is what the law is. So by us supporting this language, it doesn't mean that we've changed anything other than acknowledging that that's what the law is and it's in the bill.
I wouldn't say, I think it's more than that.
Okay.
A lot more than that. First of all, you're requiring public safety to adopt and publish sample forms. I don't.
Right, and that's to make sure that it just helps the.
Yeah, when buying, selling, transporting. So we're asking public safety to develop and publish, adopt and publish. We're asking public safety and A&R to conduct a public outreach campaign concerning laws governing scrap metal sales, which, did they say they needed money to do this? Good. And the requirement that they, a written acknowledgement that they're aware before the certificate, is that a new requirement, or do they have to sign some acknowledgement now?
No, so scrapyards have to get a permit
Right.
through the town and then through A&R. First it goes to the town and A&R. And it's just, so on that permit, there'd be a place for the salvage yards to check off, yes, we're aware. That's not a requirement right now. This would make it a requirement that they're aware when they do their permits up, when they put their application in, they're checking off, yes. And we do that through a lot of our different permits and
But
licenses.
they're not doing it now,
No.
they wouldn't do it administratively?
It's not a requirement, so.
And if they're permit, they have to annually renew the permit.
So they could just modify their form and add that
Right.
check?
Right, yeah.
You did take testimony from law enforcement on this.
Well, from law enforcement, A&R.
And criminal justice?
Yes.
This came to transportation for different reasons. Do you think Senate Economic Development should really just look this over for any reason?
This came to us, didn't go through transportation.
And it didn't go to natural resources either?
No, this is because it's Title IX. It's consumer protection. That's how we deal with it in the House.
I wondered if the section 5 council
We were, so had it,
talked to judiciary.
yes, they were fine.
Show the language for this judiciary, just to make sure.
But we asked, that came up in a conversation that we had with the Criminal Justice Council. And that was a suggestion from them that we include this in the language. Because they used to do that, they got away from it, they want to get back into it again.
And they're doing inspections now, but that's the section 3 about periodic inspections. It just makes it clear that their inspections that they're doing also includes the record keeping practices.
Right.
And that at least one they're really
Right.
focusing on.
Yep.
Because before, they might just look at the environmental like that.
Exactly.
Right, so on section 5 actually is broad, that has to do with after any new or amended code laws that affect law enforcement. So it's much broader than this.
Yes.
It's, right.
But again, that was their suggestion.
Well, yeah, they should. I mean, obviously keep their training up to date, if there are new laws, but, so judiciary and the House saw that was okay.
we just ran it by them, asked them if they wanted
They're
it.
redoing, the council's redoing their whole curriculum. It's in a 3-year initiative, so just wondering how that fit.
Senator Ron Hinsdale just responded. She said, I have no concerns about greater inspection and information regarding salvage yard and scrap metal sales. Section 5 was more of a judiciary issue from what I'm seeing by section. Perhaps you mentioned sections 2 to 4 to us. As long as no one has requested to testify on these sections or raise concerns, I have no concerns with their advance. Senator Clarkson, I can discuss if it feels appropriate, but I would lean away from bringing it back into Senate Economic Development. So she's fine with us.
So then we just to judiciary.
Yeah,
Email Senator Sears right now.
well, no, we can give it to him.
You can email, not or Mr. Vice Chair. Go vice chair to vice chair.
I took an email, wants to email somebody.
Thank you for coming down to this.
Happy to.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, thank you, senators.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We're all trying to address the same problem. I guess.
Yeah, as long as you don't, no one said, we absolutely hate this, and so we're walking into some
Well,
kind of,
we took testimony from salvage yards too, and we get rights from.
and you took testimony from ANR. And so normally, do they do announced inspections out of the 20 they do a year, or do they?
I don't know if, I know this one, we want to make sure that at least one's unannounced. I mean, our feeling is that these, this gets around to everybody. And so they kind of know the A&R, you never know when they're going to ask you for it. I mean, there's a gas station, they come around every 3 years to check my operation out. So, you want to make sure that you're giving, when you're doing your self-certifications, that you're doing them correctly.
And it's public safety that would do the sample forms for buying, selling, transporting, and
Yes.
keeping records?
It doesn't have to be much.
Why is it 59?
No, I was just wondering, public
ANR
safety.
is regulating it.
It's more for what law enforcement would be looking for when they're looking at the records, what would be helpful for them to understand.
Because that's why they're keeping the records, just for law enforcement. They're having law enforcement do the.
Correct.
That's why public safety, doing the forms.
Yes.
Well, you can go back to the floor.
Yeah, we get training now.
Oh, that's right, you have training.
Oh, that's true.
We do that.
We did it.
I thought we did.
Did sexual harassment.
Yeah, sexual
Yeah.
harassment.
Oh,
We did in past years.
You're welcome to join us.
We had the, more Yang come in.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, maybe that was 2 years. Maybe that was,
Well, then we had the training from the NCSL person.
that was sexual harassment.
And, well, no, that was bullying and harassment.
This is Commerce for Commerce bills that intersect so many different jurisdictions.
A lot.
So what do we want to do with it?
Well, I think we've got a reading already that economic development doesn't have a problem with the amendment. And we just need to make sure that what the Criminal Justice Council, that we get the okay from Sears, and if that works, then, yeah, and then we can know, and then in the absence of, if there's nothing more that we hear, then we could vote to concur.
I did email just now, Hashem and Sears.
You do? You can't help but keep those digits busy. So I think then we're,
You get paid by the word.
I think
So assuming no objections from them, are we as a committee comfortable with this bill concurring?
I'm okay with it.
yeah,
Senator?
Yeah.
We don't need a vote when we concur with the House. We
No.
don't have a committee. We don't have it in our committee.
no, the chair would just get up and say
Right.
concur
Oh,
On the floor.
on the floor.
All right, we don't actually have the bill.
I love floor speeches. Are we gonna go through the section by sections of the changes?
But thank God we don't allow your computer in it.
Usually.
I just would make sure that everybody, that all the committees are aware before you go through section by section on it. And that we don't get 38 questions about some of the people that are either chairs or vice chairs or whatever. I'd make sure of that, because I could see a lot of questions being asked from 3 different committees about questions. So I wish that they would say, hey, S48 is going to come to the floor. I've reviewed it. I have no problem. So say it in their committees.
Well, Kay should sort of done that.
right? But as long as the committee knows.
Does the Senate Transportation Chair want to speak up to do that?
We'll report it as 48, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and just say what the changes are.
Enforcement.
Oh, boy,
Yeah.
it's on your day, God.
Don't bring any props.
Gross.
Don't bring a
Don't bring a
Cadillac.
catalytic converter
They're heavy, aren't they?
in.
Remember when Senator Benning brought the trash?
Yeah.
Heard about it. Ruin it for everybody that likes to use props.
No, they're not permitted in the Senate.
Well, like the other day, Senator White said, like, I have this, but it's not a prop.
Yeah.
A loophole. Prop.
Okay.
You just say it's not a prop, then it's not a prop.
Now you go to committee conference. How you coming at your first meeting?
Well, we just sort of got organized. I don't know how many differences. There are plenty.
Yeah, I didn't even know what to focus on in that book.
Thank you.